Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susan Olson. I'm the Director of Legislation for the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Last time we gathered, there was a little bit of snow on the ground and frost on the pumpkin. Today we've got wind, no snow, but under any circumstances, we're delighted that you decided to come here to see us today. I'd like to take a moment and ask for a blessing on all of us who are gathered here today in fellowship, in friendship, in peace, maybe not so much in harmony, but Father, we ask your blessings on this gathering today. For those of us who keep the faith, keep the peace, and keep a flame in the window for freedom and liberty. Thank you, Lord. Let each of us spend the day today and the days forward doing the work that we need to do. Patrick Henry said, if trouble must come, let it come in my time, so my children and my grandchildren can live in peace. Amen. And for anybody who doesn't know the woman standing next to me, my friend Jane Cormier, the Honorable Jane Cormier, former state representative, leading light director of Piccolo Opera, here today to sing for us the national anthem. Jane.
Thank you. I think I better come up here.
They're on the highest step.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, give proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land, o'er the free, and the home of the brave.
We'll see later.
What could be harder to follow than that? I've been struggling for the last few days on what I wanted to say here today. We're calling this the second annual Gun Rights or Women's Rights Rally. But the truth is, it isn't gun rights, it isn't women's rights. It's our natural rights. And I was going back and reviewing history, and if you think about it, it's incredible to comprehend that 400 years ago, in 1616, the first permanent colony on these shores was established at Jamestown. Named for King James, the nephew of Elizabeth I, the woman who rightly or wrongly launched so much of the Western world and its civilization through a company called the East India Trading Company, who sought to expand horizons, to broaden markets, to bring things, to bring commodities, to bring ideas, to bring people together through the world through trade and commerce. The people who came to this country came partly for trade and commerce. They came for freedom, mostly freedom of religion, not freedom from persecution, but freedom of religion. But only 150 years after Jamestown was established, what Elizabeth I had launched had grown into a bloated, monstrous corporation, a business too big to fail. The East India Company had ended up as part of an armed force, maintaining its colonies, maintaining its trade, fighting the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, to keep their trade routes open. Part of keeping those trade routes open, part of keeping that domination, was funding those armies, funding those fleets. The colonies here, for the most part, had enjoyed not having to be part of that corporation. But what led America, what led the 13 colonies to rebel, was the British government deciding that in order to continue to prop up that war, whether it was for trade, whether it was for maintaining a place in foreign shores, maintaining markets, needed tax revenue. The United States, the 13 colonies had not been taxed successfully. The Crown had not come for taxes. But when they started in 1763, the colonists rebelled and began to question, began to petition their government, began to say, we have no part in your war, we are our own colonies. For 12 years following that, the colonists continued to petition the British government to say, we want no part of it. We're our own people. Leave us alone. The British government decided, well, the only way to calm these people down, to get them to bend to our will, to bring them into the fold and force them to pay taxes, is to disarm them. General Gage, under the command of King George III, began the process of banning the shipment of munitions, the components of munitions, to the colonies. That wasn't enough. The actual banning of firearms began. And New Hampshire, all its own here, was the first colony to actively say, no, you cannot take our firearms. At Fort William and Mary, a group of about 200 men decided to ambush the Brits who were coming in to take the munitions from what is now Fort Constitution. The Brits lost and left. But they didn't quit. So a history of disarmament by bullies, by tyrants, by people who want to bend you to your will isn't new to us. It isn't new really to any civilization, but for those of us in New Hampshire, disarmament is not an option. The Women's Defense League was started 2 years ago because we saw an increasing threat in Concord, whether it was started in Washington, whether it was started in our own legislature, of seeking to tighten the screws down on firearms ownership, on our own freedoms, on our own liberties. We decided as an organization to say no. 400 years, 1616 to 1775, was a start, but how many people here outside of the Women's Defense League know that just 100 years ago, women in New Hampshire had the right to own a firearm, had the right to do whatever they wished to do with it, as did every other citizen in the state of New Hampshire. What happened to change that was the growing threat of foreign-born, unnaturalized people who'd been brought to New Hampshire to work at the Amoskeag mills, who, when the economic downturn began at the mills, decided that they needed to have someone help them, not just secure their jobs, but plead their case, and embarked on a 9-month strike against the management of the Amoskeag mills. They were outnumbered, partly by the government here in Concord, but at the end of the strike, Democrat Governor Fred Brown and his legislature passed a law that made every foreign-born, unnaturalized citizen in the state of New Hampshire, not just the 17,000 people at the Amoskeag mills, but every single foreign-born, unnaturalized citizen in New Hampshire a felon, and forbid them forever from owning a firearm. But they had sort of a nice catch to it. If you were a naturalized citizen or a New Hampshire-born citizen, then golly gee whiz, you could go see your local police chief, fill out some papers, ask him for the right to carry a firearm concealed, and if he found you suitable, he'd grant you that piece of paper. For 100 years, the word suitable has been on the books of the New Hampshire Revised Statutes annotated. We've been fighting for 2 years to ask the legislature to say, well, we don't think suitable is very clear. Some of you probably are firstborn or secondborn citizens here in New Hampshire. Why does your ethnicity, why does your race, why does your gender entitle anyone to make a determination on whether you are suitable or not? Just this last week, after us working for 2 years with the cooperation of the firearms organizations here in New Hampshire and many, many state representatives who believe our cause to be correct, a local lobbyist, a firm called the DuPont Group, I think their offices are over here somewhere, took money from Michael Bloomberg in Washington under the guise of an organization called Everytown for Gun Safety. They paid $12,000 to the DuPont Group to come to the legislature and convince the legislature that, you know what, suitable's still okay. Police chiefs know who their people are. They know whether you're a good person. They can look in your eyes or touch your face and decide what's in your heart. Are you a criminal? No. Are you safe? No. They decide $12,000. So far, we beat them. We won on the floor, the vote was overturned. But you know what? That $12,000, we want to thank our state reps for doing that, but the fact remains that Governor Maggie Hassan is going to say no. What happened on the floor of the House was Senate Bill 336 that makes the change from suitable to not prohibited to by state or federal law. They added an amendment that we were told the police chiefs wanted to make it more acceptable to them. They wanted immunity from prosecution in the event that if they granted a license to someone like me or any of you here in the group, and if we went out and committed some sort of firearms-related crime, that it wouldn't be their fault. That amendment passed. That is the bill that is going to go to Governor Hassan that would exchange suitable for not prohibited by federal law. But about if the police chief makes a mistake because he can no longer look in your heart? He's not liable. I think that's wrong. But that's what $12,000 gets you. Now, whether Governor Hassan is going to veto that or not, I have no idea. I suspect she will. She's running for Senate. She hates guns. Maybe she doesn't hate guns. She probably hates guns in the hands of people not like her. All right? Citizens. So we have a few days. I don't think it's gone to her desk yet. Gentlemen, it hasn't yet. When it goes to her desk, she's going to have two choices. She can say, yes, I think that discrimination is wrong. I think that no longer should a police chief be able to decide whether you're a suitable person or not. She can say, well, you know what? It's okay that my police chiefs now have immunity. Or because she's running for Senate, she can hide behind her skirts of public safety and veto it. My money's on a veto. But we won't know yet until that happens. So the Women's Defense League, we haven't given up. We're not going to give up. If she vetoes the bill this time, we'll stay involved. We understand history. Those of us who fail to study it are doomed to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. We don't want to do that. So, we're working hard. We want gun rights to be women's rights, of course. We want gun rights to be everyone's rights. But what we want and what we demand are our natural rights. And for everyone who came here today, your natural rights are on the line. Not just the governor's veto, but we've got elections coming up. I hate politics, but we got to deal with it. Elections have consequences, folks. Pay attention. What happens in Washington may not affect us as much, but we're here in New Hampshire, and it is our responsibility to keep New Hampshire for New Hampshireites, not for Mike Bloomberg, not for his $12,000 an hour lobbyist, not for Governor Hassan to posture for her politics. This is our state. They need to leave us alone. They need to go home. New Hampshire is for New Hampshire. I want to introduce a very special person in many, many ways. Michelle Lavelle is the chair of the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. She's a mom, a homeschooling mom. She runs probably the best education choice information and website in the state. She's a serious person, but her police chief didn't think she was suitable. So Michelle's going to come up here and tell you her story. This is what happens when you let the law become enforced by people who change their minds in the morning. Michelle.
Thank you for being here today. I do want to share my story with you because I think it's very clear that suitable has been abused. So I'd like to ask you, what makes somebody suitable? How would you define suitable? And if everybody here answered that question, they would have entirely different answers. And that is exactly the problem. Because there is no definition, every police chief can make up one of their own. They decide who is suitable for pistol revolver licenses. Based on recent situations, suitable seems to be more about compliance and who you know instead of being a law-abiding citizen. So last summer, my pistol revolver license came up for renewal. My chief had approved me twice before, But this time, he declined me. He rejected it. He said that I was not suitable. Based on what? I'm not a prohibited person. At the time, I didn't even have so much as a speeding ticket to my record. So what was it based on? Turns out that even though I had completed a completely accurate and fully completed application, he wanted my references phone numbers. I know, minor little thing, but it's not required. That was an unlawful demand. And I didn't do it. I received phone calls from my police chief saying, well, you need to supply those phone numbers. I said, interesting, not going to do it, but interesting. Because the department was then slow to follow up with my references, they had to actually put something in the mail. My friends did not receive the letters from the police department until day 13 of what is supposed to be a 14-day process. Coincidentally, I got my rejection letter dated day 12 of that process. They had no intention of me getting approved. There was no way that I could meet their demands based on their faulty process. Ultimately, I had to take my police department to court because that is the only remedy allowed in statute. I was deemed guilty and had to prove my innocence in a court of law. Because of a bizarre series of scheduled snafus by the court, it ended up taking 112 days to finally appear before the court. The hearing was extremely adversarial, but the judge quickly ruled in my favor, and by the end of the day, my attorney got notice from the police department that my application and license were approved and waiting for me when I got home. How about that, huh? While waiting that 112 days, I was at risk. I was not allowed to discreetly carry a firearm to protect myself or those with me. What if I had been in an abusive relationship? Thank God I'm not. But how many women are and are not found suitable for arbitrary reasons by their police chiefs? The whole ordeal cost me considerable time, energy, and money. How many people can afford to take time off of work, perhaps get a babysitter, and hire an attorney to challenge their local police departments? It is no surprise that few can defend themselves given the price. Recently, 2 members of the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire told us that their local police departments, Litchfield and Hudson, are insisting on their references phone numbers too. Make no mistake, these are unlawful requests. Sure, phone numbers are reasonable, convenient, might expedite the process, but the demand goes beyond what is required on the form. It is also expressly prohibited as a requirement because the license application says, quote, "No other form shall be used by officials of cities and towns," unquote. Yet police departments are routinely demanding additional information to determine suitability. And these are not the only abuses by New Hampshire police chiefs. The Seabrook Police Department has their own special set of requirements, which include showing proof of residency and references that must be local, but not family members. The state form already requires that the applicant's address be included, and that the statement must be completed in good faith, and any misinformation is grounds for denial. I ask you, when will this capricious abuse of power end? When will people be judged by the law instead of those who twist it? Earl Sweeney of the Department of Safety acknowledged these abuses in evidence submitted to the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. In a letter dated April 19th, 2016, Mr. Sweeney said the suitability requirements are, quote, seldom abused. The fact that they are abused at all is unacceptable. What if we were talking about some other type of abuse? Would we accept it if it happened only seldom? Of course not. Likewise, we will not accept the state-sanctioned abuse of law-abiding citizens who are denied their rights. The discrimination and abuse can end today if Governor Hassan will allow House Bill 582 to pass into law. It is the twin to last year's Senate Bill 116 that we refer to often as constitutional carry. In 2 consecutive years, the New Hampshire House and Senate passed these bills that would set the parameters for issuing licenses with clear and unambiguous terms, replacing the vague word suitable with unless the applicant is prohibited from possessing a firearm by state or federal statute. This legislation would end nearly 100 years of state-sanctioned discrimination that continues to this day. Our governor has the opportunity to address a horrible injustice, to correct an ugly statute based in hatred and ignorance that hurts law-abiding citizens today. Please, I urge you to contact Governor Hassan, urging her to end the abuse, end discrimination, and pass House Bill 582. Thank you.
A second chance? She's had several chances.
How many criminals have been rejected for their concealed permits?
About as many who have applied, I suspect. We're citizens of this state. We're not all legislators, some of us are. Some of us take that time and make that commitment to come here and try to do the right thing. We don't often see statutes being repealed. More typically, we see new things being added. But as citizens of this state, shouldn't it be enough that when we elect people to represent us, that they come to Concord and they do that? Do we have to hire lobbyists? Do we have to raise the money to have the folks in the nice suits and the shiny shoes come up and whisper in the ears of the governor or her staff or a department head? Or do we have to fight people who've been at the Department of Safety for 30 years, maybe on their second or third career, who decide, well, we're okay. It's only seldom that we abuse people. We shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to be here on a Sunday when the weather's almost nice, when we should be out doing things, whether it's gardening or spending time with our families. We shouldn't have to come here with like-minded people. We all know what we need to do. We shouldn't have to come here and do this. By the grace of God and by some smart voters, we have some excellent state representatives who do come to Concord and do fight the good fight. One of our very favorites, who also happens to be a member of the Women's Defense League, is standing right over here, Catherine Prudhomme O'Brien. Many of you folks know her from WMUR as having the courage and the tenacity to follow around Hillary Clinton and rail against her husband and his abuses. has fought many other fights in Concord quietly, calmly, rationally. And she's taken the time to come here today. And I think she has sort of a little surprise for us. So if I might, I'd like to ask Representative O'Brien to please come up to the microphone.
Good afternoon. I'm gonna maybe adjust this. This is a sort of memorable, horrible day for me. 20 years ago, on May 15th, I went to the state prison to do some volunteer work. What I'm talking about is I was a member of a support group. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I was a member of a support group for women that had been sexually assaulted, and we went to the state prison and we talked to men who were convicted sex offenders that were about to be released. And I met a man who was unlike any of the others. He was not even trying to pretend that he was trying to get better. He was much different. The other thing that set him apart was, unlike any of the others, he had killed someone. He had killed a little boy, and he was about to be released from the state prison again. I called Jean Shaheen's office because this was of course devastating to me, and something else that I had experienced in my life was when I was 7 years old, I survived an abduction attempt that I would say was pretty serious since the guy knew my name. And I had put that away and not thought about that for a long time until I met that guy. When Jean Shaheen was elected governor, she said that her door was open to any constituent with a concern. So I got the idea in my head that as a constituent with a concern, I could call her. And I did that. And I told her aide all about it, and all the newspaper clippings that I had found about the person, and all the facts that they had told me at the courthouse about the case. And I made a comment that she was running for re-election and she doesn't want to have a Willie Horton issue, of course, so she wants to know about this and fix it and make it right. Instead, her aide laughed at me. I was pretty devastated by that also, and I went to bed for 3 days. I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. This was very inconvenient because I had a toddler at the time. So I just put that aside for a little bit and tried to ignore it. I figured I was never going to get involved in politics. I was never going to vote. I was never going to do anything. But luckily I met my state representative, Bob Letourneau, at the time. He was my state representative. He later became my state senator. And he explained how I could fix this by writing a letter to the parole board. And it seems kind of obvious now, and I did that. And the man was never given a parole hearing even. So good, okay, great. And he has since passed away, I presume of natural causes. I don't know. All I know is that he's passed away. So good, that's over. But for the last few decades, I've thought, normal people need to be in office. Normal, regular people. You know, you were talking about the suits from away. Don't worry, I can recognize suits from away. I listen to you guys more. Don't worry. And so, of course, all of those experiences had led me to analyze the situation with the Clintons a little bit more intensely than maybe other people had done. When I saw Juanita Broaddrick give her interview on Dateline NBC, I knew instantly this woman's telling the truth. And I thought the National Organization for Women was going to follow up and ask some tough questions and demand some answers, and that never happened. So that's how all of this happened, where I finally, last January, I had a rather vigorous, one-sided question and answer session with Hillary Clinton. I would say one-sided because I was the only one talking. She wouldn't respond. And that led to reporters calling me. And I did one interview with a reporter who asked me specifically if people had been calling me and saying nasty things, and yes, that was happening. One person called me and she told me that I should watch my back, but Worse than that, she told me my kids should watch their back. My kids did say their names on the answering machine, so that she heard their names there. But the fact that she was bringing up my kids specifically and saying that they should watch their back. One of them is only 14 years old. What am I supposed to do? This was a pretty upsetting situation, of course. This was a national reporter, and I told her that I was really happy that in New Hampshire, any woman walking down the street, some bad guy with ill intention, he should just assume that she may or may not be packing heat, and he should act accordingly. And that's why I love this state. Oops. I don't want to lose my ticket for the door prize. All right, so I have a little poem for you. I'm not a poet, but I tried my best. I wrote an hour ago on this envelope. So in New Hampshire, I may be packing heat when I'm out walking my dog. And I may be packing heat when I'm out on a jog. And I may be packing heat when I'm taking a hike. And I may be packing heat when I'm riding my bike. I may be packing heat when I'm out at a show and when I'm out in the garden using a hoe. I needed something that rhymed. I may be packing heat on the House floor, making a parliamentary inquiry, or at my town hall, paying my dog licensing fee. I may be packing heat while at the store finding my new spring look, or at the park reading a book. I may be packing heat while reading this poem. And when it comes to packing heat, New Hampshire ladies, I know I'm not alone. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kind of remarkable. Poem wasn't bad either. But isn't it interesting that we even have to think about it, that we even have to worry that going for a jog or out on your bike, that you have to worry about bad guys. Bad guys don't worry about us. As Representative Flanagan asked, how many criminals have been turned down applying for a firearms license? Well, the answer is none, because they don't apply for them. That's why they call them criminals. But we're not here today to say that we have the right to carry a concealed firearm. We're not here today to say the Constitution is my gun permit. We're here today because we have natural rights. People forget that we have these natural rights. The governor has forgotten that we have these natural rights, and we shouldn't have to ask permission to exercise them. Period. And we have, as a member of our organization, a shy blonde girl named Kimberly Morin. She's the president of the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. She's a writer. She's a project manager. She's a pistol instructor. Did you get your rifle instructor yesterday? Just went through the class. Yeah, she's probably packing. But Kimberly's going to come up and talk about some of the things that maybe we need to think about, some of the things that maybe we need to do. So I'd like to introduce Kimberly Morin.
I didn't put up, I didn't. Microphone's a little high for short people. Is that okay? All right, this looks longer than it is. I just had to print the words big because I'm blind. So, once again, we find ourselves, a majority, having to battle Governor Maggie Hassan to actually do what her constituents want. Once again, both the House and Senate passed another constitutional carry bill, and once again, Governor Hassan threatens to veto it. Why? Because Governor Hassan is in bed with gun control addicts Michael Bloomberg and Mark Kelly. That's quite the hellish threesome, isn't it? Neither Mark Kelly or Michael Bloomberg are actually from the Granite State, nor do either of them live here, thank God. So why does Maggie Hassan cater to them, over her own constituents? Money and political aspirations. That's right, everyone. We little people who actually live and work here, who pay taxes here, own and rent homes here, and make New Hampshire a better place to live, are playing second fiddle to two gun control addicts who don't give a rat's ass about this state. And I'm not excusing my language on that one. Oh no, I gotta bend a little. And apparently neither does Hassan. You've all heard by now, over and over and over and over and over again, that New Hampshire has an opioid and heroin problem and how we have to help them. Why is it Maggie continues to coddle illegal drug abusers, yet continues to allow the state to abuse law-abiding citizens? In case you missed it, and Michelle spoke about it, the New Hampshire Department of Safety admitted that law-abiding citizens are abused. They outright admitted it. After a year and a half of us saying, we're being abused, they finally said, you're right, you're being abused. Yet here we stand on the cusp of another Hassan veto. Her solution, if you're abused by the state, lawyer up. Because she believes you can all afford thousands of dollars for a lawyer to fight against abuse by the state that she could end, but is refusing to do so. And just why are Bloomberg and others of the gun control lobby trying to push gun control in one of the safest places on planet Earth, as we were so recently labeled by a study? New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine are consistently states with the lowest crime rates in the entire country. Bloomberg has tried to push gun control in all three states, failing miserably to date. Why is it Bloomberg is concerned with safe New Hampshire? Why not worry about places where there actually is a higher rate of violent crime? Because those places typically have much stricter gun control. So why push gun control in states where there isn't an issue? Because Bloomberg and his gun control minions know that if they can shove gun control down the throats of citizens here, they can do it anywhere. Missouri just flipped Bloomberg the middle finger by passing constitutional carry, even though his heartbeats fought against it. Vermont beat them, as did Maine. And the Granite State has beat Bloomberg's gun control even when the House was controlled by Democrats. There were a slew of outrageously ridiculous gun control bills put into place by crackpot hoplophobe Catherine Rogers this session. They were all handily shot down. Rogers let us know during a recent Everytown press conference that she'd be pushing more New York-style gun control next session. Why in the hell would we want New York-style gun control in a place that has far less crime? It's interesting. Gun owners seem to be the last group of people in this country who are abused and demonized on a regular basis. When a criminal commits a crime with a firearm, we're all blamed. Why don't they blame all drivers when a drunk driver hurts someone? Why don't they blame all Muslims when an Islamic jihadist kills people? Because they hate us. There are an estimated 90 to 100 million gun owners in the United States. Gun crimes aren't even a statistical blip on the radar comparatively. Statistics even show that as gun ownership has risen, violent crime in general has gone down. Yet here we are, fighting against the out-of-state gun control lobby who buys our legislators to push gun control against us. In case you haven't noticed, this is an election year. We get to have some fun. One of the ways we fight against Bloomberg is to get his lackeys out of office. Senators like Hosmer and Woodburn. They represent strong Second Amendment districts in Laconia and North Country, yet they allow the state to abuse their constituents. Laconia and North Country, red alert, get on the ball and get prepared to help gently remove them from office. We're the only ones who can change the course of this state. We have to be loud, we have to be clear, because Hassan's ignoring us, the entire New Hampshire Senate Democrat caucus is ignoring us, and half of the half-wits and Democrats in the House are ignoring us. We're the only ones who can change that. They make backroom deals that we know nothing about. And it's not just one party, it's both. Make sure you check your representative or candidate's background, because they might be talking all big and bad like, yeah, I'm all for guns now, but they weren't a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So double check. In closing, I have a message from Michael Bloomberg.
Kimberly!
You know what those colors said? Come and take it if you want it. Come and take it if you think you can.
Wait.
Come and take it, but we'll warn you.
Hey, Bloomberg, you may have the money to buy Maggie Hassan. You may have the money to buy every Senate Democrat in New Hampshire. You may have the money to buy some of the half-wit Democrats in the House. Heck, you even have the money to buy a Republican-owned lobbying firm to push gun control. But let me tell you something, Mr. Bloomberg. You don't have the money to buy the will of the people in New Hampshire. Our rights are not for sale.
Put down like a wildfire for freedom. It's burning even now. You see, even if you got an army, when all is said and done,
So we can clarify her remarks for those of you who didn't understand, but I think you did. You know, oddly enough, the Women's Defense League is a nonpartisan organization. We're not a political organization. We're a simple little New Hampshire charitable trust. We don't endorse candidates. We oppose a lot of candidates. We oppose a lot of elected officials. Are we going to be active in the upcoming elections? Yes, to the extent that, as Kimberly said, we're going to look at their records. We're going to expose their records. For example, she talked about not just Democrats, but Republicans. On the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, there's a vice chair. His name is David Welch. He's been in the House 15 terms, which means 30 years, which makes him almost
Sid's coming to transfer responsibility for the program.
I'm gonna go say bye to Susan.
Back together.
At gmail.com.
One last thing though, it's just the four, right? Nothing.
Number 4. Just a number 4.
Right now.
Number 4.
It's going to be
And spelled out.
All right, no number symbols for what I'm asking.
The 4 is a number.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
It looks like, well, most of
Yes, we
it
have to
looks
go
like
to
Derry is. We'll just make sure that everybody. All right.